All right, let's get into this. Switch this screen over. What's going on? Happy Sunday, folks. Hopefully you guys can hear me fine. We did not reboot this machine, but I did unplug the mic. This should be a pretty quick one. Wasn't a ton going on in the news this week, but there were a few that I want to bring up that I think are relevant and definitely have some strong signal to all that noise that's out there. We're going to cover that today. We've been talking about, the three main topics today. I'm going to really cover three main core pieces, and then we'll talk about other crypto stuff too, just in like kind of off to the back. But Tether and related to stablecoins, the continuation of the clamping down and banning of certain activities in certain countries, be that Binance having some additional pressure from a couple countries. And you'll see that here. And then the whole question about, blockchains, cryptocurrency when it comes to their immutability and continuations of challenges to that immutability in some fashion. It's happened many times over the course of years for several blockchains that have frozen certain things and then convinced enough of the community to update nodes with new changes, thereby kind of erasing the history. So there's like a philosophical, I'm torn on a couple things in this, on certain things when it comes to like smart contracts and stuff versus like the sanctity of a chain. And we'll get into this, but there's, we're going to talk on both sides of it. And then hopefully we'll get somebody on from THORchain later this week to maybe talk about that. But so real three main topics. We're going to talk Tether, we're going to talk Binance issues, and we're going to talk and peel apart what's going on with THORchain right now for anybody that's been tracking that or not, and how it has ties into Ethereum and then some of that ecosystem when it comes to node providers and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully you guys are in for some of this content. Hopefully you guys can hear me fine, and let's get into this. So we're going to go straight to the Tether news first, and let's go to the big screen. Wow, it turns white here whenever I have that. Well, because I have the background turned off. Never mind. So Tether, this is an interesting thing. And so I saw this article on CoinDesk, and I track, if you don't track like the Tether printer on Twitter, anytime any major action happens on Omni Network when it comes to like Tether printing new issuance or having some kind of burn, there is a Twitter bot that kind of notifies you when this happens. So then you can go and search that bot and you can see all the times that this occurs. Or you can sit there and just use the Omni Blockchain Explorer and look and see where, the stablecoins issuance has occurred. And the one thing I pull from this article, and this goes back into last week's discussion around Tether and some of that CSNBC concern with it, where you had Jim Cramer out there talking about Tether and is it backed? And of the things that it is backed, it seems to be a lot of Chinese paper, commercial paper. And with China cracking down, is there a correlation to Tether not printing in the last few weeks, about 3 weeks, and the China news? And when you come down into this Coinbase article, and we can zoom into this a little bit, let's expand this a bit for you guys can see this, and scroll down here, as we have a situation where there could have been, the second part of this is really where I'm focused on, is that in this first few statements here, when China started to crack down there was close to 1,000 people at least reported that were arrested for a range of reasons in China and around about, related to illegal exchanging, and then the stuff that we do know from China of where they've shut down miners and that sort of thing. How much did this have an impact potentially on Tether or not when it comes to the OTC buying, so the over-the-counter buying, for the issuance of new minted Tethers because of the exchange volume that's in China? Is this contraction part and parcel of why Tether hasn't printed? And it's showing indirectly a lot of its ties to China, like, when it comes to Tether and how vulnerable is Tether, structure around the current China situation. So those are the real kind of pieces that I'm looking at there, where you see a lot of this, where you have commercial paper's short-term, overnight obligations with these companies. And most of the time they're investment grade, and most of the time they're very liquid, so it should be all good. But in faces of crisis, the market just disappears. And when people want their money, it's very simple. The economic activity is similar to the bank deposits and the money market funds. They need to have, regulated comparable laws. Well, now that's Chairman Powell talking to the fact of how, when you take a debt position and you've loaned out money, how quick can you come back and then be made whole on that? And if Tether's really backed by, it's not that the paper was never good. It was not that it wasn't a legitimate transaction. It is about the political situation around there, to where they can't really move the money because they don't know what's going on. So this article really lends to that story. And it comes back again into that speculation of risk when it comes to, with some of these cryptocurrency projects that are in countries that are really clamping down. So again, I mean, it's been a few things this week on this, but, Tether's real functionality, is it having more issue here because of the situation in China? But it's just a continuation. Obviously, I'm tracking this story. I do not hold any Tether any longer. I have interacted with Tether many times. It was kind of the go-to stable coin back in the Poloniex days, back in 2016. So, there is some risk there. And don't worry, guys. I see some of the questions coming in. I will you guys can ask, and I'll go through questions at the end there. So you can re-ask some of those questions. We're going to move on to the next thing before we can get to questions, which is an additional Binance news. Last week, Binance had been in the news related to the UK's decision with certain banks and regulatory environments like Barclays, or banks being Barclays, and there was one other one. I actually had it in my notes here. Let's go back over to my notes here for that one. Yeah. Santander, I don't know that bank, but that's in the UK, at least area in UK, where they prevented folks that use those banks to interact with Binance. So it's again a collapsing of the structures around the commercial ability and the normal user bank. If you're just a non-accredited investor and you want to spend your money in your bank to these institutions like Binance, they're starting to shut that down in, now in UK. There's been some news now with this reaching to Hong Kong, which makes sense, being as part of China now, and Lithuania. I'm an American and probably am completely butchering that. Lithuania, I think that's it is. To where now there's actual security and futures commissions in Hong Kong saying that they have no business registration with the Binance Group in Hong Kong, and then that they're raising concerns that Binance stock tokens could be offered to Hong Kong investors. And there's a follow-up article to this where Binance has said that they're going to drop this concept of stock-based tokens completely anyway. So that second point's kind of a moot point. Again, both of these articles are on CoinDesk. We'll make sure that are part of the in our description below there. We'll have these down there for you guys can click on these. So the source content right now is coming from CoinDesk on these two particular articles. And then Lithuania banks also issuing warnings around unlicensed investment services. So again, this comes back down to, what's the FUD on Binance? Is this FUD on Binance? Well, from an operating standpoint, this is more of a regulatory issue. So it's nothing right now that from a structure in Binance either functioning or not, I don't think is in question. I think people take that as, oh, Binance is going to go down, whatever. I think it comes down to just these countries are not setting up in any kind of structured regulation with Binance yet, or they haven't submitted for certain licenses or anything like that, and they're just getting the feedback from these central banks that, hey, issuing warnings out to the other central banks that there's issues. So, it is from a Binance FUD standpoint, nothing that I'm reading in this nor following this kind of continuation of the media that's coming out on Binance isn't anything attacking Binance's like operating functionality. It's all been around regulatory. Like, do you have a business license or not? Are you following any kind of financial guidance and rules? And again, a lot of this stuff is non-regulated and doesn't have a lot of clarity when it comes to that kind of thing. So it's more of issuing warnings and maybe pulling them into a court in some countries to have some kind of feedback. The things that I would be looking for, I guess the line that I'm trying to draw here with you guys is the things that I would be looking for of like, is Binance at risk, is if there's criminal investigations in Binance itself. That's not what we're reading here. What we're reading here is banks don't want to do business with Binance, and you might happen to have your money in a bank that now is preventing you from using Binance. So that's the kind of content that we're reading on this Binance. So if you do see a mixed messaging from Twitter, that's probably what people are saying, is saying that, Binance is safe, whatever. It's just, central banks trying to keep them down. And by and large, that's what a lot of this looks like. But it is, the real crust of it is, if you are personally affected by that, or you have a bank account, you've been interacting with, let's say Binance as an example, you're going to have a real impact. Like if they shut your account down, right? I mean, that's directly impacting you. So the risk is right now, the current theme out there is that Binance is causing, because of the either non-registration or non-working with certain entities in the governments that the countries that it operates in, it could put, a risk on your capital for a period of time, because like they have to stop doing business, or your bank won't allow the inbound. And now you're in this kind of like, crap, I can't get my money for a few days because now I have to go open up another bank account that I can hook my Binance to and be able to withdraw my money. So just, that's the fair market caution, is that while the regulatory agencies and the exchanges work out what the hell's going to go on moving forward, if you're in those central entities, you could be impacted. So just FYI. So, and this is the reason why I'm also bringing up these in the news sections here, because it genuinely affects people. I don't like the hype crap. I don't like this is going to change the world stuff overnight, because a lot of these projects and stuff, like when I'm talking to different projects, people ask me why I don't cover a lot of different projects out there until they've went live and I see adoption. If you think of the last project that I actually covered in any capacity, it's been Polygon with the Matic token. And I only started talking to that because I saw a physical use case of the implementation when Z.Run got implemented, where I could see the manifestation of the use case. I could see why people would be using it, the cheapness of the transactions, the simplicity of all that. And then I looked at that as a framework that, as other things started coming in that, like into that space with Polygon, that it was, this could be a bigger, a game changer when it comes to layer 2, because it's functional, it's connected to Ethereum, and that's like an example of a project that I'll start to talk to as I'm starting to see it. Any of the pre-forecast stuff, no thanks, bros. Like, you have hard work to do, you kind of earn that to that point to where it gets highlighted. So, and then when it comes to like the news stuff, I look at things that are going to impact you, like as a person interacting with a bank and maybe this exchange, like this would potentially impact you. So just to understand the separation there of why and what I cover on this stuff. So let's move on real quick, and then we can get into questions and answers into now THORchain here. So for people that have not been checking or tracking anything to do with Ethereum or any of its projects that are around the Ethereum space or interact from a swapping or any of that kind of standpoint, I spelled Binance wrong in the title. I will fix that. Thank you, sir. The THORchain loses up to about 7.6 million in a ChaosNet exploit. So ChaosNet is its network, its platform, as it were, which is Cosmos base. So the Cosmos token, which is Atom, but the Cosmos network, which is based effectively on Tendermint as the core architecture on the blockchain side. THORchain, there was an issue with this where a hacker was able to exploit the smart contract and start to drain a particular amount of Ethereum and other subsequent tokens. And there was a few misreports on this where at first people thought it was around 13,000 ETH, and now it's down to around 4,000 ETH. And there's a recovery thing when it comes to the THORchain smart contract being halted and them convincing enough community members to shut down nodes to not accept any transfers, which is this kind of the questionable piece where people kind of go on both sides of it of like, this is decentralization. We'll talk to this in a second, but I don't fault them for what they're doing here. It's an early network. It's 3 months old. There's a lot of money at stake here. It's not rolling back like Ethereum's blockchain. There needs to be this penalty by complete failure of a network and complete loss of capital to where you have to have a perfected environment going in is a crap way of doing things. Most of this stuff is done in production. That's part of an issue, but you can't get the volume and space in this. Let me switch over to the screen real quick here, and I'll explain some basic rationale first, and then the kind of conundrum that everybody's in the crypto space. Let's go to this real quick. So main screen. All right, so there's this basic ideology. There's this framework around crypto and blockchain. Blocks are predicated on each other. You cannot change history. This is where the immutability piece comes in, and it's like the most ground rule rationale when it comes to crypto blockchains in general, right? You should not be able to change history. It's kind of lessons learned, and you adapt and move on from that. There's a two-part risk in that if you don't go in and fix a chain ending level exploit. Bitcoin very early on, like back in the Satoshi days, had an exploit, was found. A certain amount of miners could mint millions of Bitcoin. It was such a bad issue that Satoshi and Michael Hearn and a few others that were helping at that moment in time convinced the rest of the community at that point in time to halt Bitcoin and fix the issue and then redeploy a new fresh node that didn't have that bug. So very early on when chains start, and mind you, this was Bitcoin back in the day before anything else was there, they had to fix the core network then because it was a chain exploit that would have undermined the entire point of Bitcoin at the point in time. When you test in a production environment, as cryptocurrency does, where you have a deployment to the main net to actually, so it's in the wild. There are test nets, and test nets are more for, I would call them like smoke testing and execution. So in software development, you have kind of your localized environment, and then you'll test to like an integration environment. That integration is because other people are working on different features, or you may have like third-party people that have maybe APIs or other things connected. So you want to integrate with them because in a vacuum your stuff's good, but you don't know that it's going to be good in an integration test. So you have those kind of phases. Those phases exist in cryptocurrency right now. The big delta, and this just isn't for cryptocurrencies, for all development in general, is getting the real world testing. And people are like, well, why can't you replicate real world testing in your test environment? Well, it's because the transaction volume, at the most simplest way to explain it, is the transaction volume and the different types of transaction volumes. And even if you're just talking CRUD level services, which like create, read, updates, and deletes, that kind of stuff, like you can script the crap out of that and test things. But until it's really running in production, you don't get a real hint of where things are at. Now, in most computer systems, they are not billion-dollar networks, so they might be organically because of what they enable. But by definition, the crypto networks are a living, breathing financial network. So for THORchain to do what they did, the exploit's strong enough that it makes sense to where, okay, this is beyond a cheat code. This is where we pretty much have the potential to get completely liquidated. Let's freeze it. Let's fix it. And then they're not able to roll everything back, right? The ETH is not getting rolled back. Ethereum is not getting its coins that were stolen rolled back. THORchain is actually having to put up the money for that, right? So it's not a rollback, but it is a network protocol freeze, and that's where they're at right now. So I don't own any Rune. I am not part of their network. So I want to first disclose that. So I don't have anything to do with the THORchain or its token. I don't own any Thor or Rune, which I think is the token that's under it. I've talked to about it before from a technology stack standpoint, but so I'm not paid to like explain this to you guys or any way. But when I'm reading all the comments, I'm reading Twitter, this thing really came up to me. To understand what they're going through and how they're trying to communicate it to people in a world where everybody's like, you can't roll back stuff, you can't freeze networks, this isn't decentralization. It could absolutely be decentralization if all the interests are aligned to the point that like, yeah, this sucks and we're all individual nodes and we're all making a decision individually to do a particular thing that happens to be the entire network. Every single hard fork in history of any chain is effectively doing that. It's just the hard fork change moving forward is usually like a network update. So like Ethereum's, I'll give you an example, Ethereum's EIP 1559. When that goes deployed on August 4th, if more than 75% of the nodes like we're like, you know what, never mind, we're not going to do that, you're not going to have a move forward, right? You're going to have this like 25 percentile or something that just doesn't implement it. They roll all the stuff back from the change that they're about to do, and they don't accept that, and the network doesn't actually accept that update. The update's going to move forward for like 1559, and the network's going to make that change. They're going to agree. Now, they're not freezing the network. They're not pausing it, but there's a change there. This is effectively a network freeze to make sure that what's damaged now can't be extended with other exploits, patch it, then spin it back up, right? Not trying to convince people to roll back Ethereum and give all that money back. It looks like THORchain is going to, I guess, cover the cost of that out of their own treasury and then make the liquidity providers whole. So I just wanted to try to explain, because I see, I mean, mind you, maybe a couple thousand people will see this video, but like the people that really care in this space around this and understand on how to maybe behave or how they should react is, I would say, if it's for the betterment of the community and it's a software issue and you have a fix, you present those ideals out to the community. If the community as a whole agrees to hold or halt, that's a community decision for those changes and upgrades. And you should never feel like you have to apologize for that. If the community as a whole that's part of that ecosystem agrees to those changes, then it is what it is. This superficial outside pot shot, I don't know even what analogy I can use to it, from left field, people that are no stake in the game of it, that take shots at it. Who cares? Those people in general are going to do that in life through all kinds of things that you do in life. So I see some of the THORchain and the THORchain people on Twitter coming back and trying to explain their rationale. But at the end of the day, you have a plan, you're trying to execute said plan. And I'm going to go to a more detailed depiction of their, their analysis of it, which again, the best thing you can do is be as transparent as possible and then show kind of your status flow. And this is one of the examples of that, where you have a breakdown in a Thor, like this is the THORchain incident. This link is in the description if you wanted to know more. Let me zoom in for you guys. You have some detail here where you have people, contributing and telling you where it came from. Where, this was part of Bifrost, so it wasn't the router itself. Gave some examples with the GitLab, which is the code checked in of where the issues were, what and how it was caused. Which, I mean, this is valuable to anybody writing smart contracts to understand on how the quote unquote exploit occurred. It helps the betterment of all of the community to understand, as you're writing smart contracts, what to kind of consider from a use case standpoint. And then it got into the observations of like what actually happened here, what was hit, how many were hit, when it comes to the different tokens that were affected. And then the tracking at the attacker wallet level. So you can drill into this and you can see that Etherscan now has updated, that this particular address allegedly has been part of this impact here. So you have THORchain exploit here, and you see what's still out there. There's about 2,400 ETH in here, about $4.5 million worth, and then about $1.1 million in tokens. And this is where they're getting their metrics at. So I'm going to also cut real quick and come right back to this, explaining we're seeing live how powerful a cryptocurrency implementation from a data management standpoint of showing a source of truth. So we know a hack occurred. We know that this stuff moved into somebody else's exploited address, and it's all transparent for us all to see on the blockchain. We can see how many tokens they have. This isn't speculation. Think of how many times you read news and you hear numbers, and it's some analyst telling you, well, I heard this through somebody else that heard it through somebody else, and then maybe they got attached to the engineer that could read the database, and then they're giving you a number, and you're hearing it 2 or 3 times people removed. We can all come out here and independently see this. And there's, I look at it more as a holistic, future state of where we can have certain information and certain data when it comes to numbers and actual events occurring, to where there's a consensus upholding a network, and we can start to see the real net effect. A lot of these addresses have been tagged with, as a person has exploited something and they start to try to move that money around in what they would call like pure chaining, where you're sitting there moving crypto between multiple addresses and peeling little bits off. That kind of activity being now very transparent, and the address being tagged by the blockchain explorers. Now, again, this isn't going out there and updating Ethereum's address and changing something on Ethereum. This is Etherscan, which is like a separate reading database that has like an extra column to the right of the transaction ID, and then can update a tag or a label for all of us to be able to see within a UI. Right. So if you went to another cryptocurrency explorer that was looking at Ethereum, you may not see this particular address with that particular data tag. So just FYI, because I've covered things like this before, and people were confused when they may use CoinGecko or somebody else, and they weren't necessarily tagging that. So that's also kind of the differentiator between these different sites that present this information to you, on-chain data, as some will take the effort to put, a data tag with a particular address. So, and you can kind of see the movement of this Ethereum, and you can see that first kind of, 3 days ago, 7 minutes ago, it was 1,500 ETH, being, the total of there's 3 million of it, or 3,000 of it, Ethereum, and then this was some of the other ETH moving around. But it gives you, this incident report kind of gives you through that. It gives you the times and dates of the swaps that occurred, and then it gives you kind of a tokens taken, which is just that, ETH Explorer view kind of blown out with a little more detail here to where you can kind of track where all this was coming from. So, I mean, a lot of this is tracked to make sure that people aren't trying to send this stuff up to like to an exchange and then trying to cash out. So it's all this stuff's probably going to set in a hacker wallet with this kind of level of exposure on it for quite some time, or the hacker's going to take a reasonable offer that came out from THORchain, where THORchain was like, hey, contact us if you're the hacker for this, and if you return the funds that are there, we'll pay you back a bug bounty. That bug bounty is going to be kind of what quote unquote clean to cash. So they would pay out something that hacker could technically exchange for some kind of gain without having like these exploited funds that are going to be tainted on all the major exchanges from a liquidity standpoint to be able to cash them out. Now he could keep trying to use like Uniswap and move all this, because ultimately you move those tokens out to your wallet. You can use any other DEX to try to move them around, but it's all going to be traced transparently on there on the chain when they're going through all these DEX things. And every time you start paying fees, and that was part of the when you start talking about removing liquidity and exchanging so many different times, all you're doing is giving it right back to the network through a cost of fees, especially large amounts like that. So just a quick overview of the thread. I know one, I wanted to talk to the news of it. Two, I wanted to explain a little more when it came to just the ideology of, I think, where they're at mentally with reporting this, and then kind of give you guys some background on development, cadence and how that would work, out there. Let's take some questions and then I'll wrap this one up. It's been 34 minutes. We'll try to keep this to about 40 minutes total. So I'll take a couple questions. I know if some people were actually doing that. Secret time, BBT is actually Satoshi. I am not Satoshi, my dudes. Not at all. I did create my Bitcoin Talk forum login that I use out there on there right around that same time that Satoshi was leaving. So there could have been a time that if I would have had, I guess, enough intuition to like try to reach out to a creator, I wasn't thinking about that at that moment in time. It was more of like, oh, my computers can do this thing that I'm doing already. When it came to like, I was using like SETI at home with some of my GPUs, and I looked at it from like a computational thing at the time. The very first time I ever saw Bitcoin, I was like, oh, I could have my computers try to do this thing, and I happen to get a token. Wasn't really driving down into the revolution of what crypto was doing at that moment in time when I registered in that forum. What do you think about the Concord Circle merger? Concord is only supposed to own 5% after the merger. I have not been tracking it so much. So I know Circle, this is for their hardware wallet, if I'm Concord. Let me look at this real quick. It's to become a public company through the merger, $4.5 billion up. Oh, that's with the SPAC. Yeah. Yeah, company SPAC, Concord acquisition. I haven't really read into it too much on the acquisition side. I was tracking that Circle wanted to do an open source hardware wallet, and Jack was trying to make an open source version of Twitter or something, but I wasn't really tracking that as like, again, it goes to what I was saying, where it planned ideas and the starts of things I'm not so interested in. I want to see some of the results of what they're doing, some of the fruits of the labor, because I don't want to call it that talk is cheap, but like, even when there's billions of dollars involved, like in a merger, like sometimes it doesn't work. So like, I want to see the output of it and see where they're going with it, and then I would talk about it then. That's what Satoshi would say, is I'm not Satoshi. I'm definitely not Satoshi. I do not write like Satoshi. I have decided to buy an RTX 3080 Ti for Ravencoin. Is it a good idea or should I stick with Ethereum? Well, a 3080 Ti is going to have a LHR mode, which is light hash rate mode for DAG related Ethereum stuff. So I would not do that. If you're going to use a 3080 Ti for other stuff, including gaming or something, it's probably a great card for that. I still think if you don't absolutely need it, it's not worth the money right now because you're still going to be paying almost a 200% premium, or about 150% premium right now. Thought you were frozen, or you just stood there for a minute. Has the U.S. government started mining yet? Not to my knowledge, they have not. Laptop. Do you still have a P.O. box? Yes, I do, Sean. That is live. I was just up there the other day picking out stuff. Nice seeing you on here, bud. It's been a long time. Does Ethereum 2.0 kill the Matic network? No. Ethereum 2.0, so there's a lot of things, and when you say Ethereum 2.0, there's a merge of consensus, which is proof of stake. There's also other efforts to try to speed up things. Matic is definitely jumped ahead. A lot of programs and a lot of development teams have implemented their prod, their prod environments, as it were, moving from dApps on Ethereum layer 1 over to layer 2 Matic, Polygon's network. It still has an empirical connection to Ethereum as its base layer from a security standpoint. So most of the time, there can be, based on the way Polygon is set up, you can abstract it further. But as far as I know, most people have that still empirical connection to Ethereum. So it's an augmentation. Think of Polygon and Matic as an augmentation to Ethereum that really streamlines your fee cost and the speed. And last time I checked, Polygon was still pretty close to full on its network size. Is my Binance account safe? I would assume, Joe Trader. I don't know where you're at, but dependent where you're at, I would say it's always safe. You just might try to log in one day, and then they're going to say, "Hey, sorry, you can't do business here anymore. Where's your withdrawal address?" Kind of the way Poloniex did everybody, where they gave everybody like a certain date, and they said, "You got to withdraw your funds by this date, otherwise you're going to lose access to your account." Rumor says the U.S. military mines BTC. I don't know if they do. There are all kinds of contracts. The thing about so what I would say to that is that there is sites you can look up government contracts. Almost all acquisitions are public, so you can. There's only a few exceptions that I think that are maybe it goes through some things that maybe not public, but there's all that stuff's public. So if they were mining BTC, they would have had to have a procurement contract to buy mining equipment. And then they would disclose that because there's any costs that are involved in there is transparent. It has to be transparent because there's bidders, and it's kind of like this self-fulfilling prophecy where if the government wants to do things that are super, super quiet or something like that, then they would, like, if they don't put a procurement out there, some contractor's probably out there going, "Hey, what the hell, man? I should have been able to bid on that." And then they sue them. So it's this weird kind of self-regulating thing to where the degrees of separation, people will find out like, "Hey, who's that contractor just working there?" Right? So, and why didn't we have a chance to bid on that? So it's actually a good way to do it if you think about it, right? You're kind of like in a way self-regulated internally because you have so many people that are around. Which is funny because, like, if you look at any other business in the world, most people only care about the thing that they're doing. Like, they'll show up to the business and, like, man, I walk through floors of people and cubes and I have no idea what these people do. And you're just like looking around going, yeah, whatever, I'm just doing my job. Where it's a little different on at least I think it's a little different on the government side sometimes. Well, as soon. Oh, nice, Sean. You do bring up a point on that meter, Sean. So we're still missing a couple pieces. We thought we had everything from the mining for doing the immersion. We are doing the immersion. That's not going anywhere. People are probably freaking out. Like, why haven't you guys came out with a new immersion video or any of that? So we have the tanks, we have the flow plates, we have the dry cooler, we have the liquid. We actually have most of the piping on its way, still not there yet. And I believe we were missing some fittings and then how we were going to connect the motherboards above the tanks. There was this kind of design we had, and it connects to the tank and like suspends the motherboard and the power supply. And that piece isn't in yet. So when that comes in, we'll be covering it. And tomorrow, Miss BBT and I are flying down to Miami for Miner Disrupt. So if you're not following right now, hit that follow button. We're going to be covering things live down in Miami. It's going to be covering with ASIC Jungle, which is like a brokerage for equipment, marathons down there, DMG blockchains down there, large North American miners. There's going to be quite a few people down there. I'm going to sit and talk to Compass Mining. So we'll have at least one video maybe on their channel and on our channel we'll have with that. So I'll be talking to Compass Mining when it comes to brokerages and that kind of thing, for getting mining compute power, like if you want to co-host it, that kind of thing. So it's going to be a good one. If you're not following, you should absolutely be doing for that. And I'm going to try to have at least one video. It's kind of vlog-ish, at least since me and Miss BBT or Miss BBT and I should say, are headed down there together. We're going to kind of do that. Miss BBT's, she is not here, but she's on her phone listening in. So yeah, this should be a good time down there. And this should be some really good videos. I will look at a lot of your guys' questions and we'll ask some of the folks that we're doing. And we're going to make sure that every segment's going to have an ability for you guys to ask questions live to some of those folks. So it should be good. And then there's also some folks that are going to be there from like the mining GPU standpoint that I'm going to talk to. And one of the discussions is what was just brought up by Mr. Becker there on light hash rate. Is there ways around that, or what's going on with that kind of driver related stuff? So should be interesting. So that's coming up tomorrow. There should be kind of a vlogish style video there. Follow me on Twitter if you're not on that. We're going to be kind of just tweeting as we go down there and getting set up for the conference that starts on Tuesday. So we fly tomorrow. Tomorrow's the travel day, and then Tuesday is the start of the conference, and it goes until Wednesday. It's only a 2-day conference, and then we will fly back. I'm going to take one more question, which it looks like Pot just asked, when do you think we will be able to see profits to start decreasing the implementation? Profits to start to decrease the implementation of 1559. I don't understand that question. From a profitability standpoint, why is nobody talking about the miner tip? Well, nobody's talking about the miner tip. I'll start with that one, and then I'll try to back into your first question, because nobody knows really how the behavior is going to work. So technically, transaction order sort highest transaction first is usually the way it goes. So if a portion of that base fee is burned, now you're going to imagine it like it's like, I'm thinking visually, but imagine it like it's like a bar chart that's laying on its side. And in that bar chart, you have kind of lines on the totality, like you have categories within that bar chart. And you might have half that bar chart with the base fee, and then you have the other half with some kind of like MEV activity or something, and then you have this little sliver if there's an orphan and there's some extra fee there. And then you're going to have this new item that's added to the bar chart, which is a tip, the miner tip. So think of as horizontal bar charts. And then think of the base fee, let's say 30% of the base fee being burned, 50% of the base fee being burned, and it's going to slip all those bar charts down. And you're going to have this possibly new transaction order if you're looking for the largest bar first, right? So it's going to change the transaction order based on that mix of paying. So the miner tip may be that thing that pushes, like if you're seeing that and you're seeing it in a graph and you're a mining pool and you're going to reorder things to be the one that's paying you the most, then you're going to see some transactions. People that are smart with that will understand, if I want to be on top of the next block to make sure my transaction gets through, I'm going to pay more to the right on that miner tip and push my bar chart bigger than anybody else's, and then I'm going to slip up to the top to be the first thing that goes. So why you don't see people talking about the miner tip is nobody knows how that behavior is going to happen until it's live. Because while we can see and kind of create a test case of that in the test environment, it's not indicative of what real market behavior is. No matter how the detail and various use cases you can put into there, you don't know how the market will react and add to that tip. So the tip could become a much bigger deal, maybe, and we'll know that by a little after August 4th. And it might even take the market a little bit. I would say give it the whole entire market probably a month maybe to understand where their transactions are at in the process, and any of the people that are writing bots for automatic market making and arbitrage and stuff, it's going to take them understanding where they need to put that threshold inside their bot to figure out where they need to elevate that price to. And that might happen a little faster because that's at the, like, I would call it it's like the speed of light. It's like the speed of money. And you have an immediate and direct impact if your bot is unperforming for the people that are doing that. And they're going to go out there and fix that. That's one of those ones that they'll stay up till 2 in the morning until they fix. And it could be within a day that all the bots are adjusted. Now miner tip is making up 20% of the entire ETH fee. So sorry for that long-winded answer, but I wanted to try to explain that. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap this one up. Hopefully it was good and you guys got some information on it. And make sure you're subscribing and following for tomorrow. And we're traveling to Miami.